It all started on a rainy evening, the kind where the sky looks like it's carrying the weight of every sorrow in the world. Streets shimmered with reflections of flickering lights, and the city buzzed with people who had no time to notice the girl standing quietly by the gate of a luxury skyscraper. Her name was Alina 13, soft-spoken, and always putting others before herself. She wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, and she definitely didn't belong anywhere near the building that housed one of the country's most feared and admired billionaires. But today, she was there with a purpose. Alina's world had always revolved around her younger sister Mehar. After their parents passed away, Alina stepped into the role of both mother and father. She gave up her college dreams, worked double shifts at a diner, and still found time to braid Meher's hair before school. Meher, brilliant and kind, had earned admission to one of the top medical colleges in the country. But dreams come with a price, and that price was something Alina just couldn't afford anymore. Tuition was due. The deadline was tomorrow. And then came the offer. It arrived unexpectedly, in the form of a clean white envelope left at her locker. No name, just a short message. I need a bride. You need money. 1 year, no questions. Come to 8th Avenue, Tower. 8 p.m. Alina thought it was a prank, but something about the timing so precise, so cruel made her curious. Desperate even. She didn't have any family to ask for help, no hidden savings, no miracles left to hope for. So, she stood there now, under the heavy sky, soaked and shivering, staring at the towering building where her fate would change forever. Inside that building sat Zion Malik. Cold, calculated, utterly ruthless, a self-made billionaire. Zion was the kind of man tabloids couldn't stop writing about. Tanned employees couldn't look in the eye. He didn't do feelings, didn't trust anyone, and certainly didn't believe in love. For him, relationships were business, emotions were weaknesses, and marriage, just a contract, nothing more. Rumors swirled about him needing a wife to secure an international deal with a traditionalist investor. But he didn't have time for romance, and he didn't want a gold digger. What he needed was someone desperate enough to say yes. Someone with no expectations and everything to lose. That someone was Alina, when she entered his office that night. Soaked from head to toe but with her chin held high, Zion didn't expect much. Just another girl trying to look brave while being completely out of place. But there was something about her eyes. They weren't afraid of him, they were pleading with fate. He slid the contract across the table. 1 year, you follow the rules. You pretend to be my wife in public. I'll pay you enough to cover your sister's entire education, plus extra. No questions, no interference in each other's lives. This isn't real, it's business. Understand? Alina's fingers trembled as she picked up the pen. She wanted to scream that this wasn't her, that she wasn't the kind of girl who made deals like this. But what choice did she have? For Meher, she would walk through fire. For Meher, she would sell her pride. I understand, she whispered, and signed her name. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Zion Malik ties the knot in secret ceremony, mystery bride, identified as unknown waitress. Suddenly, Alina's life turned upside down. Paparazzi chased her. People whispered. His world was a brutal place. and now she was in the middle of it. Designer clothes, grand parties, luxury cars, none of it made her feel at home. Every smile was fake. Every hand she shook carried judgment. She was the poor girl who'd snatched the most unattainable man in the country, and Zion, he remained distant. At home, they barely spoke. He kept to himself, as cold and unreadable as ever. Yet sometimes, late at night, Alina would catch him watching her. Not with desire but with confusion, as if he couldn't figure her out. Why didn't she ask for more? Why didn't she try to get closer? She didn't act like the others. She didn't care about his money, his power, or his name. She cooked for herself. She called her sister every night. She cried when no one was looking. And slowly, something began to shift. It started with little things. A new book left at her bedside, the exact one she'd mentioned once in passing. A car waiting outside her sister's college. A warm cup of tea on a night she had a cold. Alina noticed, but she said nothing. Zion noticed too, but he didn't understand why he was doing it. This wasn't part of the deal. He'd married her for convenience, to sign a deal, to make a point. He never planned to care, but now he was lying awake at night, listening for her footsteps, wondering if she'd had dinner, waiting for her laughter to echo down the hallway. And when he saw her, in pain even, the smallest tear, something inside him clenched. One evening, Alina returned home, looking pale and shaken. Her sister had collapsed at school, and the hospital said they needed tests, expensive ones. She didn't say a word to Zion, just quietly opened her phone to search for part-time jobs. He watched her from across the room, and for the first time in years, Zion Malik, the cold-hearted CEO, who trusted no one, felt his chest tightened with something unfamiliar. Was it guilt? Was it protectiveness? Or was it something far more dangerous? Something he swore he would never feel again. He stood up, crossed the room slowly, and said in a low voice, "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina didn't meet his eyes. "It's not your problem." But it was. And as she turned away, he realized this wasn't just a contract anymore. It was personal, too personal. And just when he thought he could manage the storm inside him, something happened that would shake everything. Something that would test the limits of their agreement. Then the hidden feelings they both refused to name, in that moment, changed everything. But what happened that night? Why did Zion show up at the hospital, long before Alina could call for help? And more importantly, what secret was Zion hiding that could destroy the fragile trust growing between them? To find out, stay tuned. Zion stood in the hospital hallway, staring through the glass at Mihor, lying unconscious in the bed. Machines beeped softly around her, and a nurse adjusted the four. Unaware of the storm brewing behind the billionaire's composed face, he had arrived before Alina, having received an alert from a private contact he'd quietly placed at the medical college weeks ago. Alina didn't know. She didn't know that Zion had been quietly watching over her sister, making sure she stayed safe without ever asking for thanks. When Alina rushed in minutes later, breathless and panicked, she stopped cold at the sight of him. For a moment, she looked more confused than relieved. "How did you?" "I was in the area," Zion replied, the lie sounding strange even to him. That night, as Mihor stabilized, Alina finally broke down. "See, She sat on the hospital bench, head in her hands, whispering over and over, "I can't lose her. I can't lose her." Zion sat beside her, silent. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, but he stayed. It was the first time she cried in front of him, openly, and something about it cracked a wall inside him that had stood untouched for years. He didn't understand this version of himself. He was supposed to be cold, efficient, untouchable. But with Alina around, everything felt unsteady. Days passed, Meher recovered slowly, and Zion paid every single hospital bill without ever mentioning it. Alina guessed it, but she didn't bring it up. Instead, she kept a quiet distance, careful not to blur the lines of the contract they had signed. But the lines were already blurring. She didn't know that Zion had started canceling meetings just to have dinner at home, hoping she'd be there. She didn't know he'd memorized the way she tied her scarf when she was worried, or how she hummed old songs while making tea. Still, despite the growing closeness, something always held them back: his past. Zion Malik had not always been this distant. Years ago, he'd been in love deeply, recklessly, but the woman he loved betrayed him in the worst way possible, selling confidential company information to a competitor and vanishing without a word. The scandal nearly destroyed him. Since then, he had built his empire with steel walls around his heart, trusting no one. Love, to him, was a weakness, and Alina was dangerous. Because he was beginning to care again. As their fake marriage played out under the spotlight, the media remained hungry. Speculations rose: was she pregnant? Was she blackmailing him? Was he protecting a secret past? Alina was often photographed alone, walking out of hospitals, sitting quietly at cafes. Social media turned her into a target. People called her a gold digger, a liar, a nobody. Zion offered to send security, but she refused. "I've dealt with worse," she told him, brushing it off. Sobbed. But Zion could see the way her shoulders tightened whenever she checked her phone. Meanwhile, at the company, things were shifting. A major deal that had originally required him to be married was about to close, but something new had surfaced. One of Zion's trusted advisors had been leaking documents again. It reminded him too much of the past, of the woman who once ruined everything. And now, suspicion turned toward Alina. It was a cruel coincidence files began leaking shortly after she entered his life. His board raised questions. "You barely knew this girl," one of them said. "She could be working with someone. We've seen this before." Zion said nothing. He didn't believe it, not yet. But the doubt crept in. Quiet, ugly. One evening, when Alina returned from the hospital, she found him in the study, holding a document with her signature, one she didn't remember signing. It had been forged. Zion didn't say a word, just looked at her, searching her face for something: truth or betrayal. She didn't know. "You think I did this?" Her voice cracked. "After everything, I don't know what to think anymore," he replied. The silence that followed was heavy, painful. Alina didn't sleep that night. Neither did he. The next day, she disappeared. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "I didn't come into your life to hurt you. I only wanted to save my sister. If you truly believe I could betray you, then there's nothing more to say. Our contract ends here." She was gone before sunrise. Zaia. Anne read the note again and again, but none of it made sense. A deep part of him didn't believe she could have done it, but that part had been buried under years of mistrust. Now, alone, in the mansion that once felt too big, it felt even emptier. Her laughter, her presence, the scent of chai in the kitchen, all gone. It took him 2 days to realize the truth. The person who had framed her was closer than he thought. His own assistant, trusted for years, was behind it all. Blackmailed by a rival company, he had stolen files and forged Alina's involvement to deflect suspicion. When confronted, he confessed. Cold fury ran through Zion's veins as he listened, knowing what his silence had cost him. He had doubted the one person who had never asked him for anything, the one person who had never lied. Now she was gone, and the worst part, he didn't know if she would ever come back, but something told him she wouldn't be easy to find. She had vanished like a shadow. No calls, no messages, not even Maher knew where she was. All she had taken were her memories, Candace's heart. And just when he thought things couldn't spiral any further, news broke. A tabloid headline, a grainy photo, Zion Malik's contract wife seen in remote villages. She hiding something. Zion stared at the photo, the ache in his chest growing deeper. There she was, in a simple dress, teaching little kids at a village school, far from the noise of the city. No guards, no luxuries, just peace. But that peace was about to shatter, because Zion had made up his mind. He was going to bring her back, not for a contract, not for a deal, but because he finally realized he didn't just want her in his life, he needed her in it, forever, and what he was willing to do to win her back would change everything. Zion stared at the photo in silence. Alina looked peaceful, happier than he'd ever seen her while living under his roof. Her smile was soft, unforced. The kids gathered around her like she belonged there. It hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He'd built empires, signed billion-dollar deals. But when it came to the one person who mattered most, he had let his silence speak louder than trust. For days, he didn't sleep. Work didn't matter. Nothing did. He canceled meetings, cut off from the world, and finally got into his car one morning before dawn. No guards, no assistants. Just him and the road leading far away from the world he thought he needed. The village was quiet. The kind of place where time moved slow and people smiled just because the sun came up. When he stepped out of the car, dust on his designer shoes, he didn't care how out of place he looked. He just wanted to see her. Alina was standing near a mango tree, handing books to children when she saw him. She froze. For a long moment, no one moved. Then she turned, ready to walk away, but he called out, voice shaking, "Please don't." Alina stopped, her back still to him. "Why are you here, Zion?" He stepped closer, every word carrying the weight of everything he hadn't said before. "I was wrong. I let my past cloud what was right in front of me. I let people plant doubts in my mind instead of listening to the truth in your eyes. I didn't trust you on. That's my biggest regret." She slowly turned around, her expression unreadable. "You didn't just doubt me. You walked away without even asking for my side." He nodded, guilt in every breath. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that. but I needed to come here. Not to take you back into that old life, but to ask if I could start again with you. No contracts, no conditions, just honesty. Alina looked down, her fingers clutching the edge of her dupac. For a long moment, the only sound was wind rustling through the trees. You hurt me, she said quietly. I gave you everything I had. I didn't even ask for love, just respect, just belief. I know, Zion said softly, and you gave more than I ever deserved. I was blind, and I let my fear ruin the one thing that ever felt real in my life. She looked up then, eyes glassy but steady. So why now? Because I finally saw what matters. Because I don't want to go another day not knowing if you're okay. Because I care more than I knew I could. For a second, Alina didn't answer. Then she walked past him. His heart sank, but instead of leaving, she stopped beside him, looked up, and whispered, "You'll have to earn it." Relief flooded through him, heavy and humbling. "I will," he said, his voice barely above a breath. Every single day. Back in the city, the news spread fast. Sion Malik had left the board temporarily, citing personal reasons. Rumors swirled again, but he didn't care. For once, he wasn't living for headlines. He moved to the village for a few months, helping rebuild the school, quietly supporting the local clinic. No cameras, no interviews, just actions. Meher visited often, and eventually got a full scholarship, thanks to Zion's silent push. She never stopped calling Alina API with pride, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. One evening, while watching the sunset over a dusty field, Zion took out a small ring. It wasn't flashy, no diamonds, just a simple band with a tiny engraved star, something Alina had once mentioned she liked as a child. He got down on one knee. No contracts this time, he said with a soft smile. Just a promise to never let go of what I almost lost. Alina laughed through her tears and nodded, her voice trembling with joy. Okay. But you're still making the tea tonight. They both laughed. And that's how the girl who became a billionaire CEO's contract bride for her sister's tuition became his forever. Not because of a deal, but because real love starts when the contracts end, and what began as survival turned into something they both never saw coming. Something honest. Something lasting. Something worth everything.